Yo, what's good, YouTube? What's good? It's Stormy B-Man, and I am back welcoming you to Historical Boxing Conversation with Scrapbook Boxing. We sorry about that little bit of a delay. We had to restart our system, but we are here for another chapter in Scrapbook Boxing's Historical Boxing Conversation this evening, Tuesday, October 19th, 2021, and we are here for Scrap's conversation on the original Black Murderers Row. So with no further ado, allow me to introduce the host and the subject of the show, Scrapbook Boxing. How you doing this evening, Scrapbook?
Doing pretty good, Stormy. How you doing today? Hope everything's well. Shout out to the chat.
Yes, sir. It's all good. You know, when we run into these lemons, man, we have to learn how to make that fast lemonade. You know what I'm saying? So we got something going now, and we've got our audience out there. I want to say thank you to everybody that was in the building early and everybody that stuck around and waited. I put that message out there that we were going to start a few minutes later, but we are here and we are ready to go. Scrap has something very special for us this evening. So I hope that people have their minds open, their pen and paper ready to jot down some notes as Scrapbook gets into the conversation on the original Black Murderers Row. Take it away, Scrap.
Absolutely. The original Black Murderers Row actually consisted of 24 fighters. And ironically, you had 8 fighters per wave. It consisted of 3 waves. 3 waves of the Black Murderers Row. And it actually began between 1700 and 1710. You would have 2 fighters from America that would go over to England and challenge the same fighter. His name was Tom Cribb. The 2 fighters were Bill Richmond and Tom Molyneux. Now, Bill Richmond fought Tom Cribb in 1904, 1905. They had a couple of exhibitions that are unrecorded. But then he would be the first black trainer of America. So you had 2 black fighters, Bill Richmond and Tom Molyneux. And they happened to be the first fighters out of America. And Tom Molyneux fought Tom Cribb in 1710. And he was robbed. And if you read the story of that fight, you'll understand how dramatic that was. Because he possibly could have been the first black champion in history. So we're going to look at the first wave of Black Murderers Row. It consisted of 8 fighters. You had Sam Langford, who was the Boston Tar Baby, and I named him that because that's what they called him. He was 5'6" 3/4 inches, weighed 142 to 180 pounds. He won a featherweight championship crown as an amateur in 1902, the colored middleweight championship, the colored heavyweight championship, won that 5 times, and also the Mexican heavyweight championship, the Australian heavyweight championship, and the black heavyweight championship. He would also win a title that put him in line for the 1909 fight between Sam McVeigh and Joe Jeanette. But Sam Langford would fight fighters such as Bearcat Wright, Tut Jackson, Jeff Clark. He was known as the Joplin Ghost. Fought him 6 times. Fred Fulton, Jack Savage, Cleve Hawkins, Fireman Jim Flint. Fought him 4 times. John Lester Johnson and Big Bill Tate, Roughhouse Ware and Young Peter Jackson. Jim Barry fought him 12 times. George Godfrey, the Joplin Ghost. He would also fight the Leaperville Shadow. And he would also be known as the Mobile Shadow. Ed Gunbo Smith and Battling Jim Johnson fought him 15 times. Jack Johnson, Joe Jeanette 14 times. Sam McVeigh 15 times. And Harry Wills 22 times. That's quite impressive. I had him as my #1 greatest fighter of all times. Then you would have Sam McVeigh. He was known as the Oxnard Cyclone. He stood 5'10.5" inches, and he had a 75-inch reach. He fought from 1902 to 1921. He had a total bout career of 102 fights, 76 wins, 13 losses, 62 knockouts, and he was stopped 5 times. He would face fighters such as Sam Langford 15 times, Battling Jim Johnson 7 times, Harry Wills 5 times, Jack Johnson 3 times, Jeff Clark. He was known as the Joplin Ghost. Jack Thompson, Joe Jeanette 3 times. Fought him in 1909 3 times. February 20th, 20 rounds. It was for the vacant colored heavyweight championship belt that was left over by Jack Johnson, when Jack Johnson would become the first Black American champion in 1908 when he would defeat Noah Brusso, who was better known as Tommy Burns. And Sam McVeigh would take on a magnificent fight with Joe Jeanette. April 17th, he would lose that crown to Joe Jeanette. 49 rounds. Joe Jeanette went down 27 times. It was a total of 32 knockdowns. It was the most brutal contest in all of boxing. The fight took place in Paris, France. And to that day, I have that as the greatest heavyweight championship fight of all time. December 11th, 1909, 30-round draw. All in Paris, France. We also have Harry Wills. He was born May 15, 1889. And he faced fighters such as Joe Jeanette, Sam Langford 22 times, Sam McVeigh, Jeff Clark, Denver Ed Martin, Kid Norfolk, Jeff Thompson, Big Bill Tate, James Tut Johnson. Incredible resume Harry Wills would have, but one problem. He tried to get a fight with Jack Dempsey, had a signed contract with him in 1924, another contractor with him in 1926. And Jack Dempsey decided he didn't want to fight Harry Wills. Now, there's a lot of conversations as to why, but the reality of it, he didn't want to fight him because he didn't want to risk losing his title that he won in 1919 with Jess Willard in Toledo, Ohio. And it's just unfortunate because when you don't give a man his opportunity to create legacy, he does not have one. But Harry Wills was a hell of a fighter, and he would retire owning apartment buildings in Harlem, New York. You'd also have a fighter by the name of Joe Jeanette. He stood 5 foot 10 inches, had a 74-inch waist. He was a heavyweight, had a total bout career of 104 fights, 83 wins, 10 losses, 69 knockouts, 10 draws, and he was stopped 2 times himself. He was a bare-knuckle fighter, fought over 100 fights in the street. He would knock men out with one punch. He could fight. He faced Sam Langford 14 times, Sam McVeigh. He took on great black fighters such as Jack Johnson 10 times. Kid Norfolk, he lost to him twice, battling Jim Johnson 8 times. Kid Cotton, George Coles, and Jeff Clark 11 times. Keith Hawkins, he faced John Lester Johnson. And I'll tell you about him in one moment. Bill Tate, Harry Wills 2 times, and Black Bill. Now, John Lester Johnson would crack the ribs in 1915 of Jack Dempsey. That's one of the reasons why Jack Dempsey didn't want any smoke with some of these fighters, because he understood that they can punch, they had great defense, and they can overall fight. Had another fighter by the name of Dave Harley. He was the king of the shoulder roll. He was born March 2nd in Camden, New Jersey. 1881, Westchester, Pennsylvania. He stood 5 foot 8.5 inches, weighed 133 to 135 pounds. He had a 72.5-inch reach, had a record of 73 wins, 29 losses, 24 knockouts, and he had 3 no contests. He was in a ring with fighters such as Barbados Demon Joe Walcott, who, by the way, was the first black welterweight champion of all times. Dixie Kidd, who was the second black welterweight champion of all time. Being in the ring with Sam Langford. Like I said, he was the colored heavyweight champion 5 times. Joe Gans, who was the first black lightweight champion of all time. He also be in the ring with Jack Blackburn. Jack Blackburn was a hell of a fighter. He had 168 total bouts, 117 wins, and 34 knockouts. He was born May 20th, 1883. And April 24th, 1942 was when he died. He was a trainer of Lou Ambers and Sammy Mandel, Jersey Joe Walcott and Joe Louis, and Charles Bud Taylor. Now, he's in the Hall of Fame as a trainer and not a fighter. And that's upsetting to me because he was an unbelievable fighter. Took on fighters such as Harry Greb, Olden Light, Joe Gans several times, Sam Langford 6 times, George Cole and Larry Williams, Ed Gunbo Smith and Panama Joe Gans, Willie Langford and Eddie Palmer, Kid Norfolk and Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, just to name a few. So Jack Blackburn was another outcasted fighter, didn't get an opportunity to fight for a title. Larry Temple, 1900 to 1922. He was born 1882 and weighed 145 to 165 pounds. He was in a ring with fighters such as George Cole and Black Bill, Jack Black Burns, and Dixie Kidd, Sam Langford 3 times, Joe Walcott, Young Jack Johnson, Jamaica Kid, Jeff Clark, fought him 4 times, Young Peter Jackson. What a fighter he was. And he was the creator of the Bolo Punch. And then you would have fighters such as Stefano Garcia and Kid Gavilan, Bo Jack, and Miguel Barrios. They would cover that tradition of the bolo punch, but the original bolo punch creator was Larry Temple. You had George Godfrey. He was better known as the Leaperville Shadow. He became the color heavyweight champion when, unfortunately, Kid Norfolk, this is a very sad story. He was sparring with Bill Brennan in 1918, and he basically beat him half to death. He was preparing Bill Brennan for Jack Dempsey. And Jack Dempsey got word that Kid Norfolk did that to Bill Brennan. And for that reason, he started ducking the black fighters. And George Godfrey would be waiting in the wings because Harry Wills would be disqualified when he took on Jack Sharkey. And they claimed that it was excessive holding and low blow. Now, Jack Sharkey might have been getting the best of Harry Wills at that time. But because they disqualified Harry Wills, they took away his colored heavyweight championship title from him. And George Godfrey would fight for that crown. And he would now become the world colored heavyweight champion of the world. But he would lose that title to Canadian's Al Gainer. And Al Gainer would lose that title to Obie Walker. And Obie Walker would take on a fighter by the name of Elmo Violet Ray 14 times. What a series that was. And Obie Walker could punch. And Elmo Violet and Ray could fight. And they didn't get opportunities for the championship. But then you would have the second wave of the Black Murderers Row. And that consisted of Kid Norfolk, William Ward. He was born September 20th, 1895 in Norfolk, Virginia. Now, the champions at that time was Johnny Wilson. And you had a fighter by the name of Mike O'Dowd. Now, Kid Norfolk be in the ring with Harry Greb twice, Lee Anderson, Jack Blackburn, Big Bill Tate, Jeff Clark, James Tut Jackson. Before Tiger Flowers, Black Fitzsimmons, who was known as Kid Monday, George Godfrey, and Balansiki. Balansiki would become the first black light heavyweight champion of the world when he would knock out George Compartier. And Kid Norfolk was very underrated. But he unfortunately lost one of his eyes to a thumbing by Lee Anderson. And Kid Norfolk would accidentally thumb Harry Greb in the eye. And Harry Greb would fight 47 more times before he would retire. And he would have a procedure for his eye and unfortunately die on the operating table. And what was ironic about that is that he would lose his title in 1926 to the first black middleweight champion of the world. And that would be Theodore Tiger Flowers. And Flowers would die eventually on the operating table from a detached retina that he tried to get resolved. And he would die due to eye infection. We would also have Harry Smith. He was known as the Harlem Thunderbolt. He was born October 28, 1907 in Kingston, Jamaica. He weighed 151 to 155 pounds. He was the colored middleweight champion who would defeat Jack McVeigh in 1929 of Harlem's Athletic Club. Oh, what a puncher he was. As an amateur, he was 65 wins, no losses, and 55 knockouts. Very destructive. And he would knock out a fighter by the name of Charlie Ballinger, who was the Canadian light heavyweight champion. And no one can believe that. His father wanted him to become a dentist. He wanted to become a fighter. He was very intelligent. And he would go to Grubb's gym. And he showed right away that he could fight. But unfortunately, his manager didn't put him in the tournament. William Scribbler Jones was in that tournament. And he would become the second black middleweight champion of all times. And that was an opportunity for Harry Smith. But he would also fight a fighter by the name of Homer Robinson and Pal Silver. He was denied an opportunity of the middleweight championship crown by Mickey Walker. Mickey Walker had in his contract that he would not fight a black fighter once he became champion. But yet he took the title from a black fighter who was very controversial, Theodore Tiger Flowers. Many thought that Tiger Flowers won that fight. Now you also had Panama Joe Gans. He was born 1896 and he died in 1968. The champions during his era was Michael Dowd and Johnny Wilson. His name was Will Quinton, who was the colored middleweight champion of the world. He had total bouts in his career of 134 fights, 90 wins, 40 knockouts, and he would lose 3 fights. He would be in the ring with Homer Robinson and Mike McKeague. Mike McKeague would become the light heavyweight champion when he would defeat Battling Sea. In St. Patrick's Day in Ireland. And Mike McKeague was Irish. October 10th, 1915, he would win the lightweight championship in Panama. December 20th, he would win the colored middleweight championship over Sailor Dawson in New York's Madison Square Garden. He would take on Jack Blackburn, Tiger Flowers. He would lose the crown to Larry Estridge in New York's Yankee Stadium. Larry Estridge reminded me of Marvin Hagler. He was a southpaw, 5'9", bald-headed. He could punch. What a beautiful jab and right hook combination this man had. And unfortunately, he didn't get an opportunity to fight for the world championship. We also had Bobby Dubs. He'd be in the ring with Joe Gans and George Kid Lavin, Black Pearl Harris and George Cole, Black Diamond Woodson and Frank Childs, Black Frank Taylor, Professor Charles Haddon. Frank Craig, the Harlem Coffee Cooler, was another good fighter. And he faced Joe Butler and Dan Cleese. He would become the colored middleweight champion of the world. But he himself didn't get an opportunity to fight for a world title. So we're looking at Leo Patterson. He would win the AEF, America's Expeditionary Forces, in 1919. That would be the year that Jack Dempsey would wrestle the heavyweight championship title from Jess Willard in Toledo, Ohio. And he would be the first black fighter to win that title. And on his team, he had the light heavyweight champion, Gene Tunney, and the heavyweight champion, Bob Martin, who defeated Dave Kaiser, who would wind up fighting Harry Bled 7 times. But Leo Patterson would defeat Bushy Graham. Bushy Graham was out of Utah, New York, and he was a very good fighter. But Leo Patterson didn't get an opportunity. Leo Johnson did. 1915, Leo Johnson showed that he was a very good fighter. He fought Benny Lemon. But see, it was very rare to get an opportunity during those years. And then you would have the third wave of Black Murderers Row. And you would have the colored middleweight champion, Holman Williams. His name was Black Dynamite. Being in the ring with Jack Chase, young Gene Buffalo, Charlie Burley, Izzy Genazzo, Coco Kid, Kid Tornero, Eddie Booker, Ernest Cat Robinson, Tiger Aaron Weed, Randy Brown, Burt Littell, Jake LaMotta, Lloyd Marshall, Luther Slugger White, Archie Moore, Marcel Sedan. Marcel Sedan was not champion, neither was Jake LaMotta at that time. And he never got a chance to fight for the world middleweight championship. Came close. He was ranked number 1, number 2 many times, as was Charlie Burley, as was Archie Moore in that middleweight division, as well as Edward Charles. But neither one of them got an opportunity to take on fighters such as Tony Zale. And he froze that title for as long as he could, then allow these fighters to get opportunities. Now, Holman Williams would have 35 total bouts, 16 wins, 15 losses, 4 draws, and 1 knockout with the Black Murderers Row. Now, you would have Charlie Burley. During his reign, the champion was Henry Armstrong and Tony Zale, who was born September 6, 1917, stood 5'9", weighed 145 to 162 pounds. He was the colored welterweight and the colored middleweight champion. Took on Aaron Tiger Wade. Jack Chase, who, by the way, he took the title from Jack Chase, the California Light Heavyweight Championship title. Never had a chance for the world title. He would take on Burt Littell and Lloyd Marshall, Holman Williams, who he fought 7 times. He won 3, Williams won 3, and it was 1-no contest. He would take the colored middleweight championship crown away from Holman Williams in 1942. He'd also be in the ring with Joe Carter and Jimmy Bivens, Ezra Charles and Oakland Billy Smith, Charlie Banks and Coco Kid. Coincidentally, he took the colored welterweight championship crown in 1938 away from Coco Kid. He was in the ring with Dave Clark and R.T. Moore, and he would have 18 total bouts, 11 wins, 6 losses, and 1 draw with 3 knockouts with the Black Murderers Row. You have a fighter by the name of Coco Kid, who was the first colored welterweight champion that existed. His name was Herbert Lewis Harbor. He was born January 17, 1913, in Mayo West, Puerto Rico. He stood 5 foot 10 inches, weighed 175 pounds, but he started out as a featherweight. He had 249 total bouts, 178 wins, 53 losses, 10 draws, 42 knockouts, and 1 no contest. He would take on young Peter Jackson, who at that time was the Pacific Coast in California lightweight champion, and they would fight for the newly found colored welterweight championship belt. And Coco Kid would be presented with that belt by Nat Flasher, and that would be the ring belt. And that's where the ring belt would begin, with Coco Kid. And you would have a fighter. He would defeat Holman Williams 9 times, Eddie Palmer, Bill Littell 3 times. And he would have a record of 21 total bouts, 10 wins, 8 losses, and 3 draws with no knockouts with the Black Murderers Row. Coco Kid was a hell of a fighter. Now, Lloyd Marshall would have 99 total bouts, 70 wins, 25 losses, and 36 knockouts. He would face Jimmy Bivens for the duration light heavyweight championship crown, 1943. He'd be stopped at the end of the round. But he'd be in the ring with fighters such as Ken Oberlin, who was a middleweight champion of the world, Stefano Garcia, who also won the title, Eddie Booker, and Charlie Burley. Luke York, who also won a middleweight championship crown. Teddy Ross, he won one also. Guess what? Lloyd Marshall defeated all of them besides Stefano Garcia, but he would defeat the rest of those guys who would wind up getting a title. Curtis the Hatman Shepherd and Jack Chase, Holman Williams, and Anton Cristoforti, who would wind up becoming the light heavyweight champion. He would defeat him as well. Jake LaMotta, Joey Maxim, Nate Bolden, S.R. Charles, Oakland Billy Smith, Freddie Mills, who he knocked out viciously, Joe Carter, Harry Smith, Harry Kick Matthews, Carl Bobo Olsen, Watson Jones. Watson Jones would become the California State Light Heavyweight Champion. He would lose his title to Jack Chase. Jack Chase would lose his crown to Charlie Burley. But Lloyd Marshall would be 9 total bouts, 3 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw, no knockouts against the Black Murderers Row. He had 116 Black Murderers Row fights. When you look at the Black Murderers Row and what it stands for, and you look at the fighters, who they fought, the time in which they came, opportunities that they did not have, contracts that they signed, and they were reneged, losses that should not have been. Give you an example. We look at Charlie Burley. He fought Fitzy Zivic in 1938. Fought him 3 times. Twice in 38 and once in 39. He lost to Fitzy Zivic. Very controversially. He actually defeated him. But Fitzy Zivic was pulled from number 3 to number 2. Stefano Garcia was from number 2 to number 1. Henry Armstrong would take on Stefano Garcia. He was the opponent that was scheduled for Barney Ross before Henry Armstrong would defeat Barney Ross in 1938. So they wanted to make sure Fitzy Zivic got a shot because Fitzy Zivic would be the next opponent for Barney Ross. So Charlie Burley, who was ranked number 3, he became ranked number 2 when he defeated Coco Kid and won the colored welterweight championship strap. But he didn't get the nod with Fitzy Zivic. He turned around and defeated Fitzy Zivic twice after that with ease. These are the kind of things that happen. There was a rumor that Charlie Burley wanted to fight Ray Robinson, and Ray Robinson ducked Charlie Burley. Ray Robinson was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was signing a contract with Fizzy Zippy. And also a contract that was prepared for another fighter by the name of Ozzie Bulldog Harris. And Charlie Burley came in with his manager into the restaurant, demanded a fight. Now, Ray Robinson wasn't champion yet. And he said, hold on, Charlie. I'm ranked number 1 as a lightweight and ranked number 1 as a welterweight. Let me get this title first, and then you and I can talk. This is in 41. And Charlie Burley demanded a fight, almost to a physical altercation. Ray Robinson said, all right, is that what it's going to be? That's what it's going to be. You're going to have to match this contract. That's the exact words. And that wasn't the amount that Charlie Burley and his camp was looking for. He said, okay, then I'm going to go on about my business. And the very next year, Charlie Burley would move up to the middleweight division. He was welterweight at that time. And he would take on Holman Williams, and he would become the colored middleweight champion of the world. Now he's a middleweight. So now this conversation is off the table. Was Charlie Burley ducked in his career? Many, many, many times. Why do you think a black fighter who was trying to get a title would deny another black fighter at that time an opportunity? This is the spin that's been going around for years. I spoke to Charlie Burley and I spoke to Ray Robinson. Spoke to my dad and my grandfather. They had close ties to what was happening at that time. But that's the rumor that was going on, and it snowballed until this day. And it's just unfortunate for Charlie Burley because he was a hell of a fighter. He was very much avoided. Charlie Burley was knocking out heavyweights in sparring. Most of those fighters at that time avoided Charlie Burley. And then he would eventually move up to the light heavyweight division. Couldn't get an opportunity there. Then he would take on Jack Chase, and he would become the California State light heavyweight champion. What a fighter Charlie Burley was. Holman Williams would take on 2 fighters who would hold the middleweight championship strap. Marcel Sedan and Jake LaMotta. But they were not champion at that time. They didn't get the title yet. So Holman Williams and Charlie Burley would have to fight each other 7 times. Holman Williams and Coco Kid would have to fight each other 14 times. And this went on and on and on and on. Burt Littell, in 1944, is when he became a professional. And he never got a shot. So when you throw away the name Black Murderers Row, understand that these fighters fought one another several times. They were denied opportunities. And this happened from 1900s to 1950. And you'll get sprinkles of it through generations to come. But you're looking at some of the greatest fighters in boxing history. And it's just unfortunate that they were denied the opportunities that they so rightly deserve. We look at Jack Chase, little Joe Louis. He had 2 careers. Had to. Because he couldn't get fights otherwise. Unfortunately, he was involved in some extracurricular activity outside of the ring. Didn't make him a less of a fighter. Little Tiger Aaron Williams, another outstanding fighter. He had 10 total bouts with Black Murderers Row. 2 wins, 7 losses, 1 draw, and no knockouts. I mean, we look at Eddie Booker, 6 total bouts with Black Murderers Row. 2 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw, and no knockouts, but he cracked the ribs of Archie Moore. He was the California State middleweight champion, California State light heavyweight champion. He could fight. And he would lose his crown to the same man, Jack Chase. Again, they fought each other over and over and over again because they couldn't get fights elsewhere. Jimmy Bivens, who is not a member of Black Murderers Row, he is as far as I'm concerned. He had 2 total bouts, 2 wins, no losses, and 1 knockout with Black Murderers Row. Elmer Vitamin Ray, I consider Black Murderers Row member. Same problem he had. He had to take on Obi Walker 14 times. Everett Charles and Archie Moore would also be considered members of Black Murderers Row, but they won the champion. Everett Charles didn't get a crack at the title until 1949. And who gave it to him? Joe Louis. Joe Walcott, same thing. Who gave it to him? Joe Louis. Archie Moore became the light heavyweight champion when he defeated Joey Maxim in 1952. Joey Maxim would demand $100,000 for his end of the purse, and Archie Moore got $800. And the stipulation in that contract was that he had to fight him 3 more times after that. The manager was Jack Hearns, the same manager of Mickey Walker and Jack Dempsey. He was very shrewd. And he did something that Don King would do later on. He signed Archie Moore to him, provided he would defeat Joey Maxim. So the remainder of Archie Moore's career, Jack Hearns was the manager. And he would get a cut of the purse for both Joey Maxim and Archie Moore each time they fought. And each time they fought, although Archie Moore was a champion, Joey Maxim always got the most of the money. When you look at Sam Langford, and I talked about him many a times, what he had to have gone through. George Dixon, what he went through. My God, what he went through. And you had so many great fighters during that time. And it's just unfortunate that's the way the times were. And for that reason, that's why you have Black Murderers Row. Because you put a group of men in somewhat of a battle royale circumstance. Because that's really where it started. And you make them fight each other. May the best man win. When you look at Tony Zale, the title was frozen in 1942. Ended in 1945 because of the war. Tony Zale froze these men out. Yes, the title was not on the line, but he disrupted the ranking system. He didn't fight the men he should have fought. Jake LaMotta was ranked number 1. Charlie Burley was ranked number 2. He didn't fight Jake LaMotta. He didn't fight Charlie Burley. He fought Marcel Sedan. And Marcel Sedan wound up defeating and knocking out Tony Zale. In Marcel Sedan's American debut, he was supposed to take on Charlie Burley, and he did not do so. And this is the issue we have. And this was the problem why the records you see of past Black fighters exist. Because of the mafia getting involved. Because of fighters' discrimination. Fighters couldn't dare go back to their neighborhoods being knocked out cold from a Black fighter. Not when the title was on the line, for sure. Because they knew that once they lost the title, it would be monopolized. They understood. When you go to Stillman's gym, you had fighters like Sammy Saddler in that gym. You had Obi Walker in that gym. Sam Baruti in that gym. These guys could punch like hell. Billy grew up to him on 116th Street. So what kind of fighters you had there? You had the Leaperville Shadow, George Godfrey. You had Harry Wells. You had Kid Norfolk, Panama Joe Gans. Walker Smith, who would become Ray Robinson. You had a kid by the name of Louis Spider Valentine. He was a good fighter. And this is what you had. And Johnny Wilson, who was the middleweight champion from 1920 to 1923, he trained in Grubb's gym. He knew what was happening in that gym. So when you look at Black Murder's Law, always think of the three waves: first, second, and third, from 1900 to 1950. And those are the fighters that you should study. Those are the fighters that you should pay attention to. Because these are some of the greatest fighters of all times. And I just wanted to give you a brief history on what Black Murder's Law actually is, what it looks like, what can happen at any given moment. This is what happened in the past. And I just named you all the great fighters in the past. Harry Smith, the Harlem Thunderbolt, Panama Joe Gans, Coco Kid, Herbert Lewis Harvard, Charlie Burley, Holman Williams, Sam McVeigh and Dave Holly, Joe Jeanette, Sam Langford. I mean, Aaron Little Tiger Wade, Jimmy Bivens, Elmer Violent Ray, Jack Chase, Burt Littell, S.R. Charles, Archie Moore, Joe Walker. Need I go on? And it started with Tom Molyneux back in 1810, And 100 years later, Jack Johnson would take on Jim Jeffries. And after that fight, when Jack Johnson would dust off Jim Jeffries, the Boilermaker, there would be riots all over the countries. And from that point, black fighters didn't get another opportunity. Wasn't until Joe Louis had knocked out a fighter who was from New Jersey, who robbed him of 10% of his purse for the rest of his life. His name was James J. Braddock. That happened in 1937 in Comiskey Park in Chicago. So shout out to Black Murder's Law, first, second, and third wave. You've seen visuals of some of the greatest of all times. Burt Littell, Jack Chase, Henry Armstrong, Sugar Ray Robinson, and many, many more. Stormy B, man, any questions?
Yo, I'm just taking it all in, brother. It's like the names that you named were synonymous with success in the sport of boxing as these men faced off against one another numerous times. But even when some of them began to be able to have the opportunity to venture off in the more broad reception of the sport, they still left their mark in history. And the fighters of today would do well to pay attention, because history often has a way of repeating itself, especially if you live long enough or if you're able to pass on lineal message about what transpired before someone new, a new babe, comes on the scene. This is one of the reasons why it was always spoken that it takes a village to raise a child. because everyone within that community has life experience that they could share with the newborn. And in the sport of boxing, there is birth given to new fighters all the time. And it's amazing how the lineage and the respect of and for lineage is kind of lost on some of these fighters. So when you sit down and share this information with us, it's a treasure, because those of us who are really in tune with the sport, who want to learn more about the sport as much as we can about and from the sport, we are able to pick up this information from you, Scrap, as you share it with us. And it helps tremendously when we seek to understand what we're looking at today.
Let me tell you one thing, Stormy, in chat. I told you the first fighters of America were two black fighters, Bill Richmond, Tom Oliver. The first trainer of America was a black fighter, and that was Bill Richmond. He trained Tom Oliver. I told you in 1938, that was the greatest year for black fighters. And why was it so important? Because Henry Armstrong would become the featherweight champion in 1937 when he took on Petey Cerrone, knocked him out in 6 rounds in New York Madison Square Garden. Joe Louis would become the second black heavyweight champion when he knocked out Jim Broderick in Comiskey Park in Chicago. But guess what? In 1938, Henry Armstrong was the featherweight. He was a welterweight. And then the lightweight champion. He was from America. And then you had John Henry Lewis, who knocked out, he defeated Bob Bolin in 1935. He was the second black fighter, but the first American to win the light heavyweight champion. Valentiki was from Africa. Then you had Joe Louis, would be the second black heavyweight champion. He was from America. Charlie Burley will be the colored welterweight champion when he would defeat Coco Cave. Coco Cave was from Puerto Rico. Charlie Burley was from America. Henry Armstrong was the first featherweight champion, black fighter from America. And he was the third black fighter to win a title in the prestigious Madison Square Garden. First was the Theodore Tiger Flowers when he defeated Harry Greb in 1926. And then you had a fighter who, in my estimation, is very underrated. He was a light heavyweight champion. He defeated Bob Olin in 1935. His name was John Henry Lewis. He was from America. And Joe Louis. So black fighters have paid their ways for the country. If it wasn't for them at that time, some of the fighters was not from America. They were owed a debt, and they were never given the debt as a return for their investment. It wasn't until a little bit later on that started happening. But I'm speaking on it because it's very, very important to understand. So when you look at what Black Murderers Row is, that's what it is, that's what it's always been. And I just wanted to speak on that, and I hope everyone got something out of this conversation.
There is a question in the chat so far, Scrap. We have one, and the question is, okay, someone. The message was deleted. Okay. Well, we're going to open it up for questions. So any of you out there got some questions for Scrapbook, now is the time, because he likes to take questions after he's had a chance to give the conversation. So
we only got like 4 minutes for questions, so y'all need to get them coming right now.
Yeah. So we want to get any of you that may have questions for Scrapbook about what he had to share with you this evening in the conversation, or anything that's pertinent to he being available for you to ask boxing questions here, so we're opening it up for that. Scrap, I don't know if you were able to see some of the images that were scrolling through while you were speaking.
Magnificent.
But I tried to, put as many of them in there as I could, but I was limited with time. But I think I got quite a few of them. The ones that you sent me, by the way, I was trying to get those faces in there. Right. And shout out to King Vonnie 86 out there with the super chat, and also our brother Kurt Sugar, aka Kurt Anderson, out there with the super chat as well.
Oh,
thank you, brothers.
Kurt Sugar, my man.
Yes, sir.
Speedy recovery, Kurt. We all miss you, brother.
We sure do. We sure do, man. Okay. Listen, Ricky Williams, sorry about that. I'm going to go back and read that question. I think I can pull it up. It was deleted, but I can pull it up. Yeah, Ricky Williams had a question for you, Scrapbook. He said, I'm curious how Scrapbook feels about the fact that Jack Johnson wouldn't give any of the black fighters opportunities.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It wasn't only Jack Johnson. But the thing is, Jack Johnson fell into a mode where he wasn't controlled, but he didn't just make the decisions on his own. And people may not understand that. But he knew, he fought all of them guys before he had the title. He fought Sam Langford. He fought Sam Langford in 1906. Sam Langford, 2 weeks before he fought Jack Johnson, he fought a fighter by the name of Joe Jeanette. And I told you, Joe Jeanette had over 100 street fights. He fought Jack Johnson 10 times to Joe Jeanette. So he knew how tough those fighters were. So he wasn't going to take a chance fighting them guys again.
And for those that don't know, I put a picture of Joe Jeanette on the screen right now. This is Joe Jeanette. And, these guys, if you look at them, man, they were in great shape, bro. It's like, even back in those days, these fighters were just built different. They lived different. And some of these guys, were like, they had model looks. You know what I'm saying? It's like they were just tough men, tough as iron, right, Scrapbook?
Absolutely. And not only that, Jack Johnson did fight at least one black fighter, Battling Jim Johnson. That was the only two black fighters who fought for a world championship in the heavyweight division. And that was in Paris, France. And that was Battling Jim Johnson and Jack Johnson, who Sam Langford defeated Battling Jim Johnson 11 times. And he didn't get the opportunity. So it's just what it is. But that's what happened to these fighters in a nutshell.
And I think to a greater degree, the question was really about how did you feel about that? About, when you had a champion like Jack Johnson not giving the other black, your feelings and thoughts about it.
Yeah, no, I didn't like it. Mm-hmm. I understand, unfortunately. I didn't like it. And it's just unfortunate. But I get it. After researching, and I kind of understand why that didn't happen. But no, I did not like it. Because Joe Louis gave Ezra Charles and Joe Walcott an opportunity. I don't think they would have gotten an opportunity otherwise. Rocky Marciano might have given it to them because Rocky Marciano was different. Rocky Marciano I have total respect for. Total respect for. Jake LaMotta I have total respect for. Harry Greb I have total respect for. They gave these fighters opportunities. Gus Lesnovich did not. Tony Zale did not. Freddie Red Cochrane did not. Matter of fact, Sammy Engot knew the law in New York State. Ray Robinson was ranked #1 at that time. He was supposed to get an opportunity for the lightweight championship belt. But they had him registered as being 19 years old. He was not. He was 20 by that time because he was 19 when he turned professional in 1940 in New York's Madison Square Garden, October 4th to be exact, on the undercard of his exhibit, Annie Armstrong. But since they had him at 19, the New York SAC would not allow a 19-year-old to fight for the title. They would consider him a 6th-round fighter. And Sammy Ain't knew that. So it became an opportunity where the champion would make the decision. All right, are you going to fight him? And I said, absolutely not. If he's not of age, I'm not going to fight him for a title. So it became a non-title fight over the weight. They both came in at 136 pounds.
Okay, I got three.
One last thing. Marty Servo hung up the gloves in 1946 because he didn't want to fight Ray Robinson for the title. Ray Robinson defeated him twice before that, 1946. I'm sorry, go ahead, brother.
No, Ricky Williams is saying thank you for that. He had never heard that before, Scrap. So he's thanking you for the information. I put 3 fighters on the screen: Burt Lytell, Jack Chase, and Lloyd Marshall. As we get ready to go toward the end of the show, you know, tell us a little bit about these 3, Scrapbook, because these men, their names were right there in the group as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Burt Lytell used to train in Stillman's gym. And he was loved in Stillman's gym. He was something else. And again, same situation with him. He didn't get the breaks that he deserved. And he had some really good fights with the great fighters. And when you look at Burt Lytell, you're looking at really good fighters. Like I said, he had 10 total bouts with the Black Murderers Row. 6 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw, and 1 knockout. Little Joe Louis, Jack Chase. He was a hell of a fighter. He had 2 careers. He would become the California middleweight and the California state light heavyweight champion. He would defeat Eddie Booker for the California middleweight championship belt and Watson Jones for the California light heavyweight championship belt. And he would wind up being a chauffeur for Mae West. But he was also a hell of a fighter. Lloyd Marshall. He was so avoided. He was in there with Bivens and Enzo Charles and many others, but he beat the hell out of Freddie Mills, who was a very good fighter. He didn't get the opportunity he so just deserved. And it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, this was amazing to be able to run down through such a tremendous list of fighters that, and it cannot be overstated, Scrapbook, that these men fought one another multiple times. It's like
116. Yeah.
You were always in for a battle. You know, that's like Michael Jordan having to face Kobe every night. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. Would you agree? That's the equivalent, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, because these are 5-star fighters, man, and would have been world-renowned champions had they been allowed to fight and participate and not made to be sidetracked with Black Murderers Row. So it's really something else. But I am thankful that someone like yourself has the history to be able to share it with us, because now that we record it, we share it with the world. You know what I mean? And that's why you have to take integrity, you know, to its highest level. When you talk about producing content, produce something that the people can be fed and eat off of and digest, that'll make them solid. This is solid information right here. You know what I mean? And I said this once before, when you present this type of content, it can't be denied. You got other historians out there that are sitting back just watching. They would not dare write in the chat or even acknowledge us, but they're there. And other channel and content creators that are out there that don't want to acknowledge. But we're going to keep doing what we do, because that's why we're here. We do it with purpose. Okay? Other people want to look in and peep through and then try to take this and then try to create off of this. That's crap. You understand? So there's love with what we do, because we love the sport. anybody that wants to leave a donation for Scrapbook and what he does, please do so. And Scrap will tell you, I've shared super chats with him. It's not a problem for me. You understand? It's easier for him to get them off of me through this presentation than him to go through other means at this particular time. But we encourage that. We don't demand it. We encourage it. It's because you want to show that love and support. That's what we're talking about here. But would you like to give some final thoughts on everything, Scrap, as we get ready to close out for the evening?
Yes, you could tune to the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. That's my channel, Scrapbook Boxing, and you'll get a lot of other content like this. But I go into more deep information of this. I didn't have as much time as I would have liked to here, but you can get more information on this all throughout my channel. I speak on this a lot. My brother Curtis Anderson, if he was talking, he would basically tell you the same information. He knows this information. And a speedy recovery to him and everybody that's in the chat. I want to thank you for giving me your time, and I do appreciate it. And thank you, Stormy, for the platform, brother.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. And I'm just sorry we got started a little bit late, but I know that we have run the time slot. You know, we're at an hour on the show, so if you have more that you wanted to say, I'm not cutting you off. I just want you to know that. But I know that you're a busy person too, and sometimes you have things to do after the show. So I don't want you to think that I was, you know, pulling the blinds down.
No, that's fine. We have more participation, I would say, but we don't have as much as we need to. So I'm just going to get off. And thank everyone once again that did show up. I do appreciate it. And I'll see you guys another time. Later.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that, man. And salute to the brother Curtis Anderson out there. He's sending you a donation. Scrapbook, Curtis sending half a dub, as Blue Blood would say. And he's saying to you, prayers for you, brother. That's the super chat from Kurt Anderson.
Prayers to you, my brother. You already know that.
Yes, sir. So
thank you so much. I can't see all who's in the chat, but whoever's in there, thank you for showing up. Thank you for your support. I do appreciate it.
Yes, sir. But we're going to get ready to get on out of here, man. It's been another wonderful historical boxing conversation with Scrapbook Boxing for this Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. For those who missed it or came in late, you can catch it on replay. We don't take the content down on this channel. We leave it up for all parties involved that want to check it out. Please feel free to do so. And again, as Scrap mentioned, you can go over to his channel. The Museum of Forgotten Fisticuff series is immaculate. It is far more a boxing volume of history there that you can just, to your heart's content, please check in and check it out. But yeah, we're going to get on up out of here. Hope everybody have a wonderful rest of the week. For my man Scrapbook Boxing and our brother Kurt Sugar, aka Curtis Anderson, we're going to sign off for now and say peace to everybody out there. And we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.